Tonight on Mississippi Insight, the push for police reform. We talk with the Adams County Sheriff about what changes can be made. And the latest State of the State survey. It has some good numbers for Governor Tate Reeves, not so good for the legislature. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. The death of George Floyd and recent incidents of police brutality are leading to a nationwide call for police reform. Two plans are working their way through Congress, and now the president has proposed reforms. But what can be done, and can change be accomplished? We are joined now by Adams County Sheriff Travis Patten. He joins us now via Zoom from Natchez. The Sheriff, the numbers of police shootings is on the rise. How big of a problem is this in your view?
You know, all over America, it has been a problem for the last couple of years, Byron, but there are things that we put in place back in 2016 to prevent those type of things from happening. You know, it's unfortunate that it had to come to the rioting and burning down the buildings and people getting killed to get America's attention. But now that people have it, I hope that they use it in the right way to affect positive change.
What reforms do you believe need to happen?
The crisis intervention team is the first thing that we went after here in Adams County, because we understood that there was a pressure keg out there that was building, not only from people who felt like they may have been over-policed, but also some of the ones who were mentally ill. As you know, as officers, we don't just deal with criminal activity, we deal with everything, whether it's showing up on calls with the ambulance service, going with the fire department, dealing with the mentally ill, the homeless, you name it, we have to be a jack of all trades. You know, what people don't understand is right now, every officer who puts on a uniform and dons this badge are under scrutiny right now because of the actions of a few. And I just hope that people realize that not all officers are like the ones who did what they did to George Floyd. You know, here we pride ourselves on saving lives rather than taking lives. I can name off 9 different times where we've been in hostage situations where we were able to walk away, and so were the people that we were called into action on. And that was because of de-escalation training. That was because of the different crisis intervention things that we've learned over the years. And that the big part of it was because of our relationship that we've built over time with our community.
The shooting in Atlanta, for example, how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, you know, I actually just watched the news on that a minute ago, and that was very unfortunate on all sides, Byron. And the shooting in Atlanta is a prime example of what good officers are having to deal with every day here now. Because of the George Floyd situation and many others, people have seemed to forgotten the good that the good officers have done, and they just focus on those bad ones. Of course, my heart and my prayers goes out to the individual who lost his life, but those officers were fighting for their lives at first as well. But I think with him getting shot in the back, I don't think it's going to turn out well for the officers at all. I really feel like that they possibly could get a conviction. I don't know. It's just going to depend on how that our officer articulates what happened on that scene and the totality of the entire amount of evidence that's collected in that case. Either way it go, though, Byron, officers were assaulted and a man lost his life. And what that shows you is that on both sides is a powder keg. On the citizen side and African Americans or whoever encountered the police, not just African Americans, whoever, people are afraid because of what they've seen nationwide. And then on the law enforcement side, whether they want to admit it or not, you know, with everything that's been going on, the unrest and so many violent things that's happened to officers as well, I think some of the officers are concerned and afraid too. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to go home. There are thousands of lawyers out there waiting to sue law enforcement and everybody else. And what I tell my own kids is, if you get pulled over by the law, keep your hands on the steering wheel. I tell them to comply, but by no means do I want you to get out there and fight with these officers on the side of the road. And so for me, I would encourage not only my kids, but everybody, please, when you're dealing with law enforcement, just comply. And I know in some cases people did comply and still got killed. And those officers deserve to be charged for what they did. And that's why you see so much unrest. You know, Byron, when I took over here in 2016, You know, people are just being hired and background checks are being done. But one of the things we implemented here was, at the Adams County Sheriff's Office, was we started doing psychological evals on people during the hiring process. Prior to me coming here, that wasn't done. And what those evals have shown us is who's a good fit to be in law enforcement and who's overstrung. And I've even started recruiting from the field of social workers who went to school, got a degree in social work, and they also have a background in mental health counseling, because I know law enforcement is changing. The landscape is changing. How you dealing with people is changing.
When it comes to chokeholds and banning chokeholds, what are you saying on that issue?
You know, Byron, I seen President Trump's executive order where he said that chokeholds are banned unless deadly force is authorized, pretty much. And truth be told, Byron, I think that's fair. I know people may not like it because it's still the word chokehold, but as a man, Byron, and I don't know if you've been in a fight or not, but a fight is one thing, but when you're in a fight for your life, or you fighting for your family, at that point, anything goes. Now, I'm not talking about shooting anybody in the back. I'm not talking about shooting fleeing suspects. I'm not talking about when you shoot somebody that you just asked for your driver's license. I'm talking when you're in hand-to-hand combat, you've been disarmed, and you're fighting for your life. At the end of the day, officers are just like citizens. We want to go home to our families. So when President Trump said that chokeholds are banned unless it's deadly force, I can't say I disagree with that. I actually do agree with it, because at the end of the day, if somebody were breaking in your home, what would you do? Would you defend your home to the fullest? Or because of something else, you would stop short of that and let them take and kill you and your family? It's the same way, you know. It's one of those things that's up for debate, but at the end of the day, officers are human too, and we want to go home just like the next person.
This issue of defunding police, so where do you stand on that issue, and what do you think about what's going on in that movement?
I totally disagree with defunding the police. When people don't have anybody else to call, they call the police. Whether it's DHS, whether it's the ambulance service, we literally go to calls for everybody. Mental health, homeless people. And to be honest with you, Byron, the average officer now makes less than a Target or a Walmart worker. So I don't believe in defunding the police, but I do believe in more de-escalation training. I think people need to put more funding towards the crisis intervention teams who can stand in, who can come in and help de-escalate those situations, but not just crisis intervention teams. I think all officers should be trained in crisis intervention, if you ask me. I also think that all departments nationwide need to implement implicit bias training, which trains officers how to deal with racism and hate. That's one of the things that we've implemented even before the George Floyd situation has come about. People need to have this talk. I know it's a hard talk to have because it's so many feelings on all sides. The citizens need their rights protected, and officers need to be protected to a point too. But at the end of the day, on both sides, we need to stop killing people. So I'm all for listening, talking, and certain things when it comes to reform, but I am not for defunding the police.
Adams County Sheriff, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and for your perspective, we appreciate you joining us and sharing that with us.
Thank you, Byron.
When we come back, a new State of the State survey where Mississippians stand on the state flag, Governor Gov Reeves, and why support for the president may be shrinking a bit. With a renewed focus on ending systemic racism, with a push to remove the Confederate monuments around the country, in Mississippi, there's a renewed focus on the controversial state flag. And a new poll is showing significant changes in public opinion about the flag. 12 News' senior political correspondent Gerald Harris has the story.
The survey commissioned by Democratic-leaning Chism Strategies is providing a glimmer of hope for those wanting to see the Mississippi flag changed.
It's 46 to 45. I mean, it's basically a coin toss at this point.
3 years before, the Mississippi state flag was polled by Chism Strategies.
It was 49-41, right? 49% favored keeping the flag, 41% favored changing it. You know, that's a huge shift from 2001 to 2017.
19 years ago, 64% of Mississippians voted to keep the current flag. 35% opposed the measure.
The only age cohort in this poll that supported keeping the flag were voters aged 65 and older. And so as the baby boomers and those older generations become a smaller and smaller part of the electorate, I think, and we're just a few years away from being in a place where a majority of Mississippians, and maybe even a large majority of Mississippians, support changing the state flag.
But support among races remain deeply divided. 61% of white respondents want to keep the state flag. 84% of African Americans want to replace the state flag, and are 8% more likely than whites who agree with them to say the issue is very important.
That was Gerald Harris reporting. Chism Strategies also work with Millsaps College on a new State of the State survey with some encouraging numbers for Governor Tate Reeves. And that's not the only big revelation. Joining us to talk about those numbers is Dr. Nathan Shrader, Chairman of Government and Politics at Millsaps. Dr. Shrader, thank you for joining us. First up, give us the one finding that surprised you the most.
Well, look, there were several items that surprised me the most, but there was in particular the questions we asked about in our current state budget crunch or coming state budget crunch for the end of this fiscal year and the start of the next fiscal year. What areas of spending and budget prioritizing do the voters of Mississippi want to most protect? So about 35% of them agreed that protecting K through 12 public education funding was a high priority, and that cut across different lines in terms of partisanship and other variables within the electorate.
When it comes to approval ratings, the governor is up. What do you make of that poll? He's up over 50%.
Yes, no, Governor Reeves as what we would call as of right now, a net rating of plus 24. And the way we get that is you take his 52% approval rating and subtract his 28% disapproval rating for what we call the net rating. And so this is very good. You know, he's early in his term. And I compared this earlier, and it's written up in our report this way, to where Governor Bryant was when he near the end of his term, his second term, where Governor Reeves' numbers now are very, very close, but with an even stronger net approval rating than where Phil Bryant was a year and a half ago. You know, Governor Reeves has done a fantastic job of being extremely visible. You know, he was doing the daily press conferences, briefings, and now they're every few days. If you look at the news headlines on your station or anywhere else, you're going to see things that he's saying regarding the coronavirus pandemic or other things happening right now in Mississippi. He's been in front of all this, and he's very visible.
So we see the governor up, the lieutenant governor up, but the legislature is down. Why are we seeing the legislature's numbers down?
Well, I would attribute this to a few things. First of all, the legislature, if you recall, they were away from the Capitol for quite a while. And so while they were away for the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, I should say, because we're still in the midst of this, they were not really viewed as being especially active, right? Because they dispersed and they left the Capitol. And then what happens when they return to session? They have this battle with the governor over appropriation, or the right to appropriate, the authority to appropriate emergency money. And then the announcement comes that we're looking down the barrel of over the course of the rest of this fiscal year and next fiscal year, as much as a $1.2 billion budget shortfall. So all those things, I think right now are being associated to some degree with the legislative branch of government.
When it comes to COVID-19, people are split on whether the state's opening too fast. What do you say about those numbers that you're seeing? No,
this is a very interesting place where we see a split in the electorate. And I think we have to be careful when we talk about reopening. There are facets of Mississippi and Mississippi's economy that were never closed, right? Some things were, some things weren't. So this is kind of also dependent upon how people were viewing what constituted the closures around them. So the plurality of people said that 38% of Mississippians say we're moving at the right pace, that they see this gradual pace as being a very beneficial thing. But 35% say that we're moving too fast, that we're not pacing ourselves on this. They think that we need to pump the brakes a little bit, because I think what they're responding to are the frequent headlines and what they're seeing in social media every day about the certain days where Mississippi's reporting an escalating number of COVID-19 cases. And that leads us to only 18% who took the contrary view, saying that we're moving too slowly. So one thing we can ascertain from this is that, with the exception of 18% of the Mississippi electorate, most do not believe that we're moving too slowly to get back to normal, or attempt to get back to what we can say is normal in our current atmosphere.
And we'll be right back. Let's talk about the state flag. Brad Chism did a separate survey, and it all found a statistical tie. 46% want to keep it, nearly 45% want to change it. But what do you make of the change in popular opinion right now?
Oh, look, the change of the flag survey was not a part of the Millsaps Chism partnership, but this was research done by Chism Strategies, the firm itself. It's a very fascinating thing to look at the trend in public opinion as it's changing over time there. If you go back just 19 years when we had the ballot initiative here, and you had 62% of Mississippi voters say they want to keep the current flag. Today, that number is under 50%. So you can track over time that there's change happening here, and you can specifically see from that poll itself that this change is being driven by voters under 65. So as the electorate changes, and I don't mean to make this sound crass or anything like that, but you do have the oldest element of the vote of the electorate from 2001. Either they're getting older, or some are passing away. They're not there to vote anymore. They're being replaced by people whose attitudes may not be quite as hardened on keeping the state flag in place. So what you're seeing are a growing share of people under 65 who are on board with making the change.
We are in a presidential election year. President Trump has seen his numbers slip nationally, and your polling shows it is even narrowing here in Mississippi. Why are we seeing that?
Oh, no, so we were able to take a look at, over the course of the spring and summer quarters of the Millsaps Chism poll, to look at where Joe Biden and Donald Trump were comparatively speaking. Over the course of the last, between the spring and summer quarter polls, Donald Trump dropped slightly and Joe Biden rising. So we went from Donald Trump with an 11-point lead here in Mississippi last quarter to is now a single-digit lead. It's 9 points. That may sound like a lot, right? Still a 9-point lead is a 9-point lead. But when you trace back the election results to 2016, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton here by nearly 20 points. And so now you have Joe Biden surging with some of the electorate in a way that Hillary Clinton didn't seem capable of doing in Mississippi in the past, in the last election. And you can look through our data, our polling data, in which anyone watching this can go download and read, sort through if they want to study this on their own at millsaps.edu. But Joe Biden has made gains among several segments of the voters that has made the difference to help close this gap with Donald Trump to single digits. And that would be people who last quarter were telling us they were undecided. So right now, the undecided voters who have made up their minds in the last quarter are choosing Biden over Trump. And then you have a large shift happening, 18 to 34-year-olds, the youngest voters they have started to move in Mississippi, maybe similar to the way they are nationally, away from Donald Trump and towards Joe Biden. But interestingly enough, those with voters who have less than a high school degree and those who are four-year college degree recipients, there was an uptick among support for Joe Biden in those groups too. So that's really where we see the movement in his favor in Mississippi right now.
Dr. Nathan Shrader, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Byron.
All right, and we'll be right back. Thanks to Adams County Sheriff Travis Patten and to Dr. Nathan Shrader for joining us. For Gerald Harris, I'm Byron Brown. We'll see you next week for another edition of Mississippi Insight. Until then, make it a good night.